is Radio... Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water. Pick of the Pops returns next week with top 20s from 1969 and 1980. Rylan is next. This is Radio 2.
BBC News at 3 o'clock. This is Nikki Cardwell. King Charles and the Prince of Wales have made a surprise visit to Lambeth Bridge to meet people queuing to see Queen Elizabeth lying in state at Westminster Hall. They shook hands and spoke to people on the south bank of the River Thames. The BBC's Karen Giannoni is there. She says the visit has been a great boost to those in the queue.
I met one American tourist who'd shaken hands with the King, and he can hardly speak. He's absolutely overjoyed. He's come all the way from San Diego, and he just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and King Charles shook his hand. So he'll be telling that story for many decades to come. It was a real boost, and it's also just a gesture of the appreciation of the fact that so many people have done this long walk.
Officials are now estimating that it'll take 16 and a half hours for people joining the back of the queue to reach Westminster Hall. World leaders have begun arriving in London ahead of the late Queen's state funeral on Monday. Hundreds of dignitaries have been invited to the service, which has been described as one of the biggest events for the UK's diplomatic service. Whilst much of the focus ahead of Monday's state funeral has been on London, thousands of people are also in Windsor to pay their respects to the Queen. The armed forces have been rehearsing at Windsor Barracks for Monday's events. Lieutenant Colonel Fred Wells is the officer of the 1st Battalion, the Coldstream Guards.
Particularly on this occasion, everyone wants to do their level best to give the Queen the most fitting, appropriate send-off that we can. And there's a real vibe round camp at the moment. People really puffing out their chests, wanting to do their level best for the Queen. So for her final send-off, we will be looking at our absolute sharpest.
Investigations are continuing in Ukraine following the exhumation of bodies from graves close to a town recently liberated from Russian occupation. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, says Russia is being investigated for possible war crimes in the northern city of Izium. Our correspondent in Kiev, Hugo Bachega, says stories are also emerging of what life was like for Ukrainians under Russian control.
Stories of people who spent weeks, even months in basements, fearful of getting out because of stories of people being detained, people being dragged away from the streets by Russian forces. I think in some other villages that have been occupied, we're now hearing reports of, at least in Balaklia, the police station which had been turned into torture center. And President Zelensky saying that more allegations are emerging in towns and villages that have been liberated. I think that is the fear here, that this could be just the beginning.
Football, and in the early Premier League match, Manchester City won 3-0 away at Wolves. Play stopped on 70 minutes for applause to mark the 70-year reign of the Queen. BBC News, it's 3 minutes past 3.
Thanks, Nikki. It's time for the travel now with Sally.
Stark in Manchester, where the A57M has been closed eastbound at the A56 junction, the Chester Road roundabout, following an accident there. 2 lanes are still closed on the M6 southbound, approaching junction 16 at Stoke-on-Trent. Now, queues are well back past junction. There's about a 6-mile queue there at the moment, going back from Sandbach, and a northbound queue from junction 15 due to onlookers. And traffic is queuing on the M6 southbound still from 11 down to 10A towards the Birmingham